Tanake ni temp yab kuri nia Aaron ye katabare ye swangre. Hello everyone and good day. My name is Aaron. I'm Catawba, a person of the river. I'm speaking to you from the ancestral homelands of the Catawba people in what is now called South Carolina. I serve as a grant manager with Native Americans in Philanthropy, and as a proud member of the queer community, it's an honor to welcome you to today's member education session, Uniting Queer Voices in Solidarity. We're glad you could join us today for this important conversation. Please let us know you're here by saying hi in the live chat and share where you're joining us from. This conversation brings together Indigenous leaders who live and lead at the intersections of queerness and indigeneity, who have carved out space for care, joy, resistance, and cultural connection, even when the world around us and some within our own communities have tried to make those things impossible. Tomorrow marks 10 years since Obergefell versus Hodges, the Supreme Court case that affirmed the right to marry for same-sex couples. That summer was also the summer that a much younger Aaron came out to his family, not because I was waiting on a court ruling, but because I knew no matter what the decision was, I wanted to live fully, be present with my community, and exist unapologetically as myself. We've come a long way since then, but marriage equality was never the finish line. Our liberation is ongoing, shaped by generations of queer, trans, and two-spirit people, especially those of color, who organized, protested, and dreamed of more just futures long before Pride was mainstream. Pride was never just a celebration. It was and still is a call to action. Queer liberation lives on in our stories, our communities, and in the leadership of those who have always been on the front lines. Today's panelists will reflect on what being Native and queer means to them, the role of community spaces, the holistic care our relatives need, and the power of partnerships rooted in love and kinship. I invite you to listen and engage with your full self and reflect on the role you can play in advancing this movement for justice, healing, and belonging. To get us started, I'd like to welcome NAP's Education Resource Facilitator and our MES moderator, Shondine Vandeveer.
Aaron. Ja, Shondine Vandeveer Yanishia, Bilagana Nishlin, Tachini Bashichin, Sinajini Dashinala, Bilagana Dashiche. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Shondine Vandeveer. I am a member of the Navajo Nation, although I am coming to you now based out of traditional Lenape and Canarsie lands, now recognized as New York City. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and a very big Ahihet Aaron, for welcoming us and centering our conversation today. Aaron is a recent addition to the growing team here at Native Americans Philanthropy, as he said, serving as our grant manager, and he works closely with our development team in the full circle of grant writing, reporting, and research. We are very excited to have him with us and are looking forward to having more of our network get the chance to work with him. Again, we're very honored to have each of you here joining us in this virtual space, honoring our Two-Spirit and Indigenous, lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual relatives. Whether actively creating new spaces for honoring traditional ways of being, reclaiming Two-Spirit identity in practice, or reaffirming spiritual well-being as queer natives within community, our panel speakers today are bringing tremendous experience, perspective, and presence to this discussion. As we gather here virtually, I would like to take a moment to emphasize the importance of entering this space with open hearts and open minds. Each of us brings our own lived experiences into this discussion, and as we share stories of personal journeys and identity today, it's essential that we receive each of them in respect. So as always, this is a space for collective learning where mutual understanding is built through openness, empathy, and reciprocal care. With that said, I'm very excited to get started. We have panelists today, Sheldon, Angel, Letkwu, and hopefully Elton, who each bring a unique perspective and incredible experience to this conversation. And I'm excited to delve deeper into the work they and their organizations are accomplishing in Indian country. So as I call on you, please introduce yourself and your affiliations, however you feel comfortable. Sheldon, I will call on you first.
Awesome. Thank you, Shandine. My name is Sheldon Clairmont. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Montana Two-Spirit Society, and I am a member of the Bitterroot Salish here in the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribal lands. We're just off my reservation, actually, so I'm really excited to be representing my homeland. Thank you.
Happy to have you here, Sheldon. And Angel, I will call upon you next. Please, as you feel comfortable, introduce yourself, your organization, however you feel.
Padiush, Nidala, Ángel Constantino, Fabian Vera, Nidala, Tlawis Papalot. Good morning, relatives. My name is Ángel, Angel, or Tlawis. I use he, she, they pronouns, and my people are Benza or Beniza from the high mountains of Oaxaca. And I have the great privilege and responsibility and honor of serving as the Bates Executive Director, which is the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits. We were founded in 1999 in prayer with the purpose of restoring and recovering the role of Two-Spirit in Indigenous people within the American Indian and First Nation communities. We do so by creating forums for issue advocacy, wellness, spiritual, cultural, and artistic expression of Two-Spirits and Indigenous community members. We host an annual Two-Spirit powwow that has now become one of the largest gatherings of Two-Spirit in Indigenous community. This year, we welcomed close to 5,000 of our closest relatives for week-long programming, including a day-long celebration, and work in partnership with most of the Two-Spirit societies across Turtle Island, including Canada, and show up for one another and support one another as best we can. So glad to be in community. Thank you.
We're very excited to have you here, Angel. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Thank you, Sheldon. It goes without saying that your two organizations are very well known in this space, so we are very happy to have you here. I would like next, hopefully, to introduce our third panelist, Elton Naswood, if he is ready. As you could have probably guessed, our panelists have done incredible work all throughout Pride Month. It is their busiest season, however, so Elton is coming immediately from a panel conference presentation in California. We're very appreciative for him making the time to join us today. Elton, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Hello, relatives.
If you could, Elton, we're just doing a small round of introductions. If you feel comfortable introducing a little bit about your background and the organization that you're here representing today.
Yes, thank you, Shadeen. Yeah, it's a yeah, Elton Naswood and share. Tohani and shit tabaha bashashin. Na kaidene edishache tetness and the additional the yeah of the name. What I said is, hello, my relatives. My name is Elton Naswood. I am of the Near to the Water Clan board for the Edgewater clan. My maternal grandfather's clans of the Mexican people and my paternal grandfather's clans of the Tango people. This is how I am Navajo. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation and discussion around our Two-Spirit community and Two-Spirit services that we're providing, particularly today, this as we celebrate Pride Month. I am the inaugural executive director of the new National Two-Spirit and Native LGBTQ Center for Equity. Our organization was newly formed within the last year, and our organization is envisioning to become a national training and technical assistance agency where we could help our tribal agencies better serve our Two-Spirit LGBTQ community, as well as those agencies that provide services to our LGBT Two-Spirit community as well. Another aspect of the organization is to provide violence prevention to protect our Two-Spirit relatives in their communities, whether it's a rural reservation or urban, and then also play a role in advocacy at a national level to advocate for protection services, to enhance policy that are reflective of our communities throughout the lower 48 as well as Alaska.
Beautiful. We're very excited to have you here, Elton. Thank you for that introduction to you and the work that you do. I have unfortunate news. It does seem that our fourth panelist, our Native Youth Grantmaker alum, is unable to join us here today. Again, we are very grateful for the work that they continue to do outside of this space. So thank you very much for joining us, but we will give them all the time they need to do the work. I would like to start off with giving space to each of our panelists here today to really center us. Obviously, we're having a very big discussion here that is very personal and unique to many different people and tribes across the contiguous United States. I'd like to start off with giving each of you space to share what being Native and queer means to each of you and how your cultural and traditional backgrounds have shaped this expression of identity. And I know that's a broad one to start us off with. Sheldon, if you could start our conversation off.
Awesome, thank you. This is a really big question to start with. I feel like my experience getting to come into my own Native identity and my queer identity has very much been mirrored together and joined together in the way that I walk through the world. And so I feel really blessed that I found this Two-Spirit space a couple years ago, and I feel even more blessed that I have had the opportunity to come on and share my experience personally as a Two-Spirit person, but also create new spaces within my organization for people just like me. I would say I'm still very much learning about my queer identity and what it means to be Two-Spirit within my own personal tribe, a journey which I will be walking my entire life. And so I'm really blessed with this opportunity to be here and share how far I've come and also kind of reflect on how far I have to go within my community and how much I have to learn from my people and the other Two-Spirit people that surround me.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Sheldon. Angel, I will offer that same question to you. What does being Indigenous and queer mean to you, specifically within your own experience, within your culture and your tribe?
Thank you for the question. And I think it's been a lifelong journey for me personally. I came out very young. So I was a baby queer in the early 90s and doing HIV work at that time because there was not a lot of us doing that type of work, and it was still over impacting our community. I think for me, the journey of claiming a Two-Spirit identity came 20 years ago, and it was very tied to my journey in recovery. I'm coming up on 21 years in one program, in 18 in another. And I know that that has allowed me to connect and reconnect with some of us, who grew up in urban settings. I was born and grew up like a couple of years in a small village called Mexico City. It's only 26 million people. But my parents migrated there from their very rural indigenous community in the high mountains of Oaxaca. And so this journey in recovery has allowed me the possibility to connect and reconnect with my parents' ancestral land, ancestral language, and be claimed by the village. Once I started showing up and they asked me, "Who are you related to?" And I told them, well, my mom, was born here. My dad was born here. And they were like, "Oh, you're Zapotec. You're Benza. You're people of the clouds." Of course, it's a no-brainer. And so I think that the last thing that I will say in terms of claiming a Two-Spirit identity, and which resonated by an elder that gave a talk with one of the events that Bates co-hosted with, I believe, GAI, the Gay American Indians, which are celebrating 50 years on Friday. The this elder spoke about a responsibility of coming into a two-spirit identity, unlike coming out in the Western type of sense. But once you come into a two-spirit identity, then you accept and embrace those roles and responsibilities that you have to yourself, to your family, and to your community. And so that's a big responsibility. It reminded me a little bit of what, in my spiritual tradition, when we have naming ceremonies. It took me 4 or 5 years to um, work towards uh, identifying a name and knowing that name. And then the ceremony is kind of the sealing. Okay, so this is your responsibility. My ceremonial name is Tlawis Papalot. So it's butterfly of light and implicating a lot of responsibility. And so I think that for many of us, well, for me in particular, I just had to be ready. I have to be ready for that journey, that spiritual journey, and those responsibilities.
Thank you, Angel, for sharing that. I really like that phrase "coming into it" instead of "coming out." It is truly, the Western phrase of coming into yourself could not align more beautifully. And it's always heartening to hear stories of elder queer natives who pass on good advice to younger generations of LGBTQ natives. Which is a beautiful transition to another well-renowned elder on the Navajo Nation. Elton, I will pass it to you to give some sense of your journey of being both queer and Native, specifically within your tribal community.
Yes, thank you, Shandine, yeah, for that question. It's very interesting when I reflect upon my life now being 51 years old and referred to as an elder. I am accepting that responsibility, so thank you, Shandine. But I think at a very young age, my family knew that I was Two-Spirit, that I was Nugle, right? And so I grew up on the Navajo reservation, in which I would call kind of a traditional way of life, where I was raised by my maternal grandparents who lived in a hogan, didn't speak a word of English, but were caretakers for me as my mother was in nursing school at the time. So my early years of my life were shaped with cultural values, with cultural understandings given to me by my maternal grandparents. And it was my maternal grandmother, while she was still alive, that would be my protector, that knew that I was different and would chastise my cousins when they would pick on me to play, uh, you know, um, you would have these sibling rivalries, she would chastise them. And I think when I reflect upon her actions, that she knew I was Nugle. She knew I was a little bit more effeminate, but also gave me that understanding and meaning of what it was to be Nugle, right? And it wasn't until my maternal grandmother passed that my aunt, my eldest aunt, my mother's oldest sister, kind of played that grandmother role. And when I was a little older, being a teenager, she told me a part of the Navajo creation story about the separation of sexes. And now that I think about it, she told me that story, I think, in a way to validate who I was, but also let me know that it was okay. And ironically, it wasn't until I was in undergraduate school where I read an anthropological account of our creation story that included that story of the separation of sexes. So for me, that was validation of understanding who I was as an ugly person. But also, I reflect upon that story throughout my life because a part of that story, there is mentioned some characteristics of an ugly, one who brings the people together, right? The negotiator. So in my life now, I feel like I'm that type of negotiator. I have that responsibility, that role. Even in my own internal family disputes, they call on me to, Elton, can you talk to so-and-so? Can you talk to Auntie? So I feel in a Navajo cultural context that exemplified who I was as a Nugget person. And it wasn't until fairly recently that I accepted and identify with the term Two-Spirit, right? Because as Angel had mentioned, the elders speaking, once you take on that terminology and that identity, there is that cultural responsibility that you now possess. And it took me some time to feel confident enough to accept that role and responsibility, right? But I also see it as an empowering way to educate our younger Native Two-Spirit folks, those that are struggling with identity, to reaffirm that we are sacred people, within our own communities. And that cultural understanding is what I think is important for us in identifying who we are as well. So thank you for asking the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. It's always incredibly affirming to hear traditional stories that have someone that feels like you be portrayed. And that's one of the things that I truly love about, Native cultures in general, these generations that get to evolve over time. Identity doesn't exist in a vacuum. It evolves with its people, and it always has that sense of responsibility tied to it, to your communities. Speaking of communities, I know that each of you are representing an organization that has very strong ties to your communities. So I want to shift this from an individual identity into learning a little bit more about your organizations. As we said at the beginning, most of your organizations have been here for quite some time. They're well renowned. Elton, you're representing a nascent organization that is one of the first to do a national focus. So that it is in and of itself a very large mission. Within each of them, though, your organizations recognize the importance of being in community, of providing these safe physical spaces for connection. Could you each share more about your unique gatherings, whether they be powwows or smaller events throughout the year, and why these community building spaces are so important for Indigenous, Two-Spirit, and LGBTQIA+. Angel, since you referenced the largest powwow, I'm going to pass that to you first.
Thank you for the question. And I think that so first of all, we are on unceded Ramatish Ohlone land, and we work continuously with our Ramatish Ohlone community members to ensure that we are holding space in an honorable way, in a good way. And we have been around, so we're not the oldest organization in the Bay Area. GAI, like I mentioned, has been around for 50 years. How Bates started was through organizers of an international Two-Spirit gathering that was happening here in the Bay Area. And that they decided to continue organizing and creating sober spaces to continue doing the cultural programming. Unfortunately, at that time, most of the spaces available to community were bars and clubs. And so we wanted to be very intentional about creating spaces that were away from that. So, and lo and behold, and I don't think that a lot of people know this, that a lot of the Two-Spirit organizations, including ourselves, were predominantly volunteer run for many, many years. In our particular case, 23 years of our 26-year existence was exclusively volunteer run. And we would get some minimal funding to hold on to put on these events, but it was truly a labor of love. It's not until this year, and I'm the first executive director for this organization. And just to build upon, all the beautiful offerings. Right now, we are in our first community center here in the Bay Area in the American Indian Culture District. And we've had to create these spaces, these safer, braver spaces for community members to gather, to check in, to connect, and to present their authentic selves. I know that the story about the Bates powwow and also about the Bates drum was an attempt to create inclusionary spaces. Many folks, unfortunately, were being turned away from traditional powwows because of how they presented themselves, because they wanted to present themselves authentically. So, lo and behold, these spaces had to be created. One of the highlights that we promote in when we're advertising the powwow is that we degendered all the dance categories. So if you feel if the spirit calls you to do a fancy dance or a shawl dance, whatever your gender expression may be, you are welcome into the circle. And so, thus opening up that possibility for welcoming folks back into the sacred circle. But I can talk all day, so I'll pass it on to the other panelists. But thank you for the question.
It's a beautiful history with very, very strong foundations. To be volunteer led for so long is truly a testament to how much the community have put their faith in your services, and also is a testament to you serving their need. So it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story, Angel. Elton, I will pass it to you as the ED of burgeoning organization, the Two-Spirit Center for Equity, creating new physical spaces.
Thank you, Shandine, for that question. As mentioned, we are less than a year in operation. And so some of our envisioning would include providing and being able to build capacity for some of our emerging Two-Spirit groups, as I'm calling them, because I believe Bates and Montana are one and less than a handful of actually nonprofit organizations that are Two-Spirit led and Two-Spirit focused. So, as a part of that, we want to be able to provide capacity, resources for them to become um, um, organized in a good way where they can actually be paid. Because as mentioned by Angel, a lot of these organizations or groups are more volunteer and social in a way. So that kind of lends to lead that some of these organizations need a little bit more structure in that way. So we want to be able to provide that. We have been able to provide safe space virtually. Because of the social and political climate at the beginning of the year, I was getting requests from community members. Uh, to want to share space. And so we provided 2 virtual talking circles to our community where we had over 300 to 500, no, not 200, I'm sorry, 20 to 30 individuals participate in these virtual talking circles. And I've now gotten requests to be able to provide those virtual talking circles more on a consistent basis. So we're hoping to hold one of those circles again at the beginning of July. And so we'll be able to provide that information out to everyone. And it's just a safe space that people can talk about how they're feeling currently, how these executive orders may be impacting them. But I have found two trusted Two-Spirit moderators to help to lead the conversation. So that's providing some space for them as well. We've had individuals on these virtual calls from Hawaii, as well as from like Rhode Island, and then also Alaska. So, that shows that there's a need for people to want to build community and be in space with community. So we're hoping to provide that space virtually. And then also just providing support and resources to these larger events like the Bates Powwow, as well as the Montana Two-Spirit gathering. Also this year, we are going to be participating in the International Two-Spirit Gathering, which will be held in Saskatchewan, because every other year it's hosted by the US and then the following year by Canada. So this year it will be in Canada. So, and these spaces are just amazing places, not only to network, but also to exchange ideas and strategies that others are using. I often like to participate in these gatherings, particularly the international ones, because we have really good conversations with our relatives to the north, our First Nations Two-Spirit people. So they oftentimes are in attendance and offer some good advice on how they're providing services up in Canada. So those are just some examples of how the Two-Spirit Center will help to provide space and encourage space and to assist in our organization's capacity building for our Two-Spirit communities. So thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Elton. That is one of the more robust and unique advantages of being a national organization is that you get to connect with so many different communities. Obviously, within Turtle Island itself, we have so many hundreds of different nations, whether federally recognized or not, that have their own unique connections to a queer identity. So it's incredible that we now have an organization that can listen and respond to all of those needs from the different communities. Sheldon, I will offer the same question to you. If you could give us some insight into the Montana Two-Spirit Society's physical spaces of connection building and why that's so important for your own communities.
Yeah, I can. One of our biggest things that we've done for about 30 years now is the Montana Two-Spirit Gathering, and we host that in August. And that is just a gathering where we get to bring in Two-Spirit people from all over the place to come into Montana and experience that community and that space together and that healing. And then one of our newest endeavors this year, we hosted our first ever Two-Spirit powwow for Missoula Pride here in Missoula, Montana. And so that was one of my big dreams for this year that came to fruition. So I feel really lucky for that. Speaking to the importance of these spaces, I would say one thing that Angel said earlier that I think really speaks to why these spaces are important to me personally, but also the way that I approach this work is the idea of connection and reconnection. We want to provide people the place not only where they can connect with their each other, but with themselves and who they are. And what it means to be Indigenous and queer, and like where that history comes from for yourself personally, but also for other people. A lot of people ask what Two-Spirit is, and it's really hard for me to answer that question because it's not very simple. Two-Spirit is very much an umbrella term, and so we have so many different people that represent what it means to be Two-Spirit for their own tribe, even here and within this space. And so having those opportunities, or creating those opportunities, rather, where we can come together and share those spaces and share about our own history and identity, and also share in healing. I think that's really important. I think that, being able to have these spaces where we come in and connect, and like Elton said, network and share stories and create new connections that are going to carry forward into the future. Speaking to our very first gathering, that was a gathering of around 12 people. And from there, almost 30 years later, we're over 100 people. We're over 100 people coming together to experience this Two-Spirit space and, grow it into something even more than it's been before. I feel very blessed and lucky to be a representation of that growth that's happened here in the Montana Two-Spirit Society. As Angel mentioned, a lot of our work is done voluntarily until we are blessed with the opportunities to, pay people for that work and, really show them the value of what it means to get to do that, and also make sure that they can sustain themselves in that work. For me, I brought on as staff for the first time around 2 years ago. And since then, we have around 5 staff now. And that was something that, we didn't even think was possible when I was brought on. And now we just have so many opportunities to grow even more. I.e. our first Two-Spirit powwow here. That was something that came into fruition thanks to the connected efforts of everyone here. And, the connections that we made with our community that really helped us bring this all together. It was really beautiful to witness.
Congratulations I want to say to you, Sheldon, but to the entire team at Montana Two-Spirit Society. It's so heartening to hear all of the support that you've gotten, whether from partners in the field or from the community members that you serve. We've spoken a lot about so many different aspects of queer identity so far, and I do think it's important to take a moment and acknowledge that we're talking about an identity throughout life. That's why it touches on so many other different aspects of life. And we recognize that supporting indigiqueer and Two-Spirit relatives often means creating specific space for that kind of holistic care, mental and physical health, cultural connections, the feeling of community belonging, and so much more. If you could share how your work helps community members access that full range of support that they need in order to thrive throughout their life. Sheldon, I will offer that to you just to continue the conversation about the specific resources that Montana Two-Spirit Society offers.
Yeah. Like I said, we try to offer a lot of communal spaces for people to come in and really express who they are, not just amongst ourselves as Indigenous people, but within their community in general. Speaking again about our Two-Spirit powwow, that was a dream for us to kind of express our pride and our joy as Two-Spirit people, and really kind of take pride back to what it means and what it's always meant here in this country. That, we as Two-Spirit people have always been a part of this land and a part of the traditions, and a part of making what we see around here today a reality. And I would say a lot of our work really, if it doesn't directly address the needs of people, i.e. like mental health, it allows them the connections to come in and receive those from maybe somebody who is connected with us, if that makes sense. Basically, we are creating a network of care with other organizations that we also tries to touch on, like the work that we do, if that makes sense. Sorry. And I would say, it's really important for us, or I guess it's really important for people to be able to come together and experience that space where they can reconnect with their spiritual identity and they can connect with their personal identity in a way that they've never really gotten to before. I think one of the big issues that we face here in colonial society is, that separation of these different aspects of ourself. You have mental health fields, you have spiritual health, and you have physical health, and all of those are very much talked about like they're separate aspects, when in reality, they're all married together in individual people. And being able to create a space where somebody can not only express who they are, but like acknowledge all the different aspects of themselves that make up that. I think that is the most important bit of the work that we do. And so we try to create spaces where people can come in and do that. And also, we're very much working on expanding the coverage that we do to include different aspects of health. I know that one of the things that we have been discussing is the potential to bring on a mental health expert here within our facilities to help people with that. We have been blessed with amazing elders who can create connections. I know a lot of people know the name Auntie Stephen. He is here as our wisdom keeper coordinator. And he gets to not only catalog and save the stories of all the people that have made up our organization, but he also gets to create new connections and create new stories that he can share down the road. And I think that's really another important aspect of the work that we do is, not only learning about where we've come from, but saving that and remembering it, and then being able to pass that along to the next generation and the generation after that.
Thank you, Sheldon. It's incredibly important to identify, even within an organization, that one organization will not be able to fill every single gap that your community needs. So instead, shifting into a space of being a conduit, of being that center where you can connect your community members with other organizations who have a more focused mission and who are better able to offer resources is an incredible position to take. Angel, I will offer it to you, as Bates is centered in a very large urban city. I'm sure your community members have also come with a plethora of needs, whether they be siloed into mental and physical health, or the need for a cultural connection. Could you speak a little bit to how Bates is providing resources for them to access the support that they need?
Thank you again for the question. And I think that something that we wanted to do was be very intentional about how we continued showing up beyond the powwow, specifically as we had staff on board and as we were rolling out year-round programming. So one of the projects that we are towards the tail end of was the Living in Abundance project, which was a pretty comprehensive community needs and strengths assessment using a community participatory research model. And what that allowed us to do was to really assess what we had heard, in community, but now we were able to quantify it and get the data. Again, one of the issues that happens with indigenous communities is that we were erased or forgotten. And so we have to be very intentional about creating that data. You can find the report on our website if you're interested. It's only 40 pages, but it covers a myriad of topics that were important to community. And we were very intentional about not only asking about the need, but also what are the strengths? What helps us thrive and survive and flourish in community? And I think it's such an important question to ask, because the strength and the answer success, we keep us safe. No matter what administration, we keep us safe. We work with a lot of cultural artists and cultural bearers, and know that in a very expensive city like the San Francisco Bay Area, doing your cultural work or your artistic work is extremely difficult. So we are currently right now still accepting applications for a mini grants program for folks living in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as some folks in the West Coast. We are continuing to roll out cultural programming. This is Pride Month, and Pride Week for us here in San Francisco. So this on Saturday, we're holding our inaugural Two-Spirit and Indigenous Queer stage over at San Francisco Pride Festival. So please join us if you're in the area. We have a full stage. And then on Sunday, we have an hour on the main stage with one of our highlighting kind of our elder artists and cultural bearers in community who have put in, the years and now have access to a couple of million people coming to the San Francisco Pride Parade and Festival. We will be marching in the San Francisco Pride Parade this year alongside GAI, highlighting their 50-year anniversary. So um, we're a little busy, but grateful for the busyness because that only reflects the need. What I tell my staff is that, if we put out um, whatever programming we put out, if it's well attended, then it just creates more. It's meeting some type of need in community, and then it also creates more. Community will ask more, and so we're ensuring that we can meet that need. Um, Hopefully, because we are at a Native Americans and Philanthropy event, we'll also talk about funding, because we, like many Native-led organizations across Indian country, um, we are under budget and underfunded and under-resourced uh, to be able to meet the actual need in community. So I'm hoping that this also um, 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 puts a spotlight on some of the need that we currently face, just as other organizations. And I know that we come from the cultures of abundance and cultures of sharing, and we hope that that continues. Whatever knowledge that we can share in working with community, please let us know and approach us. And also, if you have the capacity to resource us, please do so as well.
Thank you, Angel, for sharing that. It is such a critical piece of organizing. Native Americans in Philanthropy recognizes that philanthropy is a colonized field. But in organizing in community spaces or nationally, it is critical to place an emphasis on data. It is so important because we as Native communities have recognized that the need has always been there since time immemorial to uplift our community. But in these spaces, having the data to back it up and to share with large groups of people, whether they be partners or allies or funders, is essential. So thank you for sharing that report. I hope everyone is able to read all 40 pages. I'm sure an incredible amount of work went into it, and it deserves to be read from cover to cover. Elton, I will pass it on to you to wrap up this question of holistic care and what that means for your organization in terms of providing resources to a national community.
Yes, thank you for that question. And, the responses that I heard from my relatives as well in the work that they're doing with their organizations. I think for a national organization, we are still envisioning how to provide those resources. But currently, right now, we are developing and editing our website, which will include a page in a section that will be termed the Marlin Fixico virtual library, where we will be able to provide access to information and services that are specific to our Two-Spirit community. And as a part of that virtual library that was named in honor of one of our elders who did pass, will include sections for health and wellness, a resource directory of other Two-Spirit organizations, data information that is available out there, some of the research papers that we do have. So we're hoping to develop this resource library to become kind of a one-stop shop for not only our Native organizations, our Two-Spirit organizations, to access more specific information, but also for our community, right? Our community to be able to access how to find Two-Spirit organizations within their communities, how to be notified, about events that are happening maybe in their communities. One of the suggestions that was given by community members was maybe providing them a virtual map where they can navigate and organizations can list their events that are happening in their community. Particularly like this month, and we were very ambitious to try to roll out something this year, but hopefully by next year we'll be able to have an extensive list of tribal communities, Two-Spirit organizations that are hosting Pride events. Because I'm seeing that on social media that a number of our communities are organizing and celebrating prides within their own communities, but also on our reservations as well. So we want to provide access to that. One of the other things that we've gotten a request for was from specific providers, mental health providers, as well as health providers who need assistance, particularly navigating the health system currently for our trans relatives. So I have a Native trans consultant that's working with a specific client in being able to access their therapy, access hormones. So kind of doing that one-on-one navigation. And I'm hoping the center can structure that more collectively so we can provide those one-on-one services for specific communities, specific community members that may need some assistance. So those are some of the ideals or proposals that we're looking at providing for our community in regards to providing resources for them.
Very exciting. Thank you for sharing all of the good work that's just on the horizon for the Two-Spirit Center for Equity, Elton. I would like to offer a question from our Q&A to you three at this point. From Micah Standing Soldier from the Advanced Native Political Leadership based in Minneapolis. They asked specifically, how do you see queer and Two-Spirit leadership transforming what public service and community accountability can look like? I feel like this is an incredible question to ask, specifically when we're talking about the hurdles that these communities have started to face, whether that be access to medical care or other obstacles. How do you see leadership transforming what this kind of accountability can look like? If anyone would like to take on that question first, I offer that to this space for you. Absolutely, Angel.
I think I'll reference, some of the work that we have been invited to participate in through the MMIP efforts, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples efforts. And actually tonight we're going to be honoring a relative here in Fort Mason, and have been invited to participate and build a memorial for our Two-Spirit and Indigenous community members who are also face that particular situation. And what I shared with folks in one panel that we were invited at in Santa Clara was that I think it's important for the conversations to be had in and among the Indigenous community around the role of Two-Spirit and Indigenous community members in your communities, in your nations, in your reservations. Because transphobia, homophobia, not honoring folks' preferred pronouns have extreme detrimental effects on community. We are in an urban setting, and many folks choose to come to San Francisco or the Bay Area because they are shunned away from or chased away from their own communities and find refuge here. For folks out there who are thinking of that because it may be unbearable, please reach out to us and connect with us so that you land safely. Because the streets right now in San Francisco or in the Bay Area are not safe. There's, we were just at a harm reduction conference. The fentanyl is taking a lot of lives right now in community. Um, Crystal meth is taking a lot of lives in community right now. And in homelessness is just not, it's not safe. So we want to make sure that that our own community, just as much as we can show up when we're not in the room in instances of homophobia or transphobia, we need you as true allies to speak up, and to remember us, because we remember you, you know, remember us, and that we're part of that community or our communities, and that we have a role and responsibility with it.
Thank you, Angel, for that reminder of community accountability and sort of flipping leadership into, yes, we can look to queer and Two-Spirit natives for need, but the accountability part is within everyone, regardless of whether they're in the room physically with us or not. Elton, I will pass the same question to you. How do you see queer and Two-Spirit leadership transforming specifically what public service and community accountability can look like?
Yes, thank you for that question, Micah, as well. What I'm foreseeing now is that, which is a good thing, is that within our Two-Spirit community, emerging leaders are kind of showing up in a way. I'd like to, commend my relative on this virtual chat, Sheldon Clairmont, for his role at Montana Two-Spirit Society. I've really seen you grow and blossom within that organization. So individuals like Sheldon, I think, are stepping up to these leadership roles. But I think it's also our responsibilities as Two-Spirit organizations, as Two-Spirit groups, to recognize those and to be able to really commend those actions that our Two-Spirit leaders are doing. One of the things I'm also seeing is that we're building a stronger network amongst our Two-Spirit organizations, our Two-Spirit leadership. So being able to share space with Angel, David Herrera at Bates, the different individuals throughout Turtle Island has been really beneficial. And I think that network has recognized that understanding of public service, of our role and responsibilities as Two-Spirit leaders, but then also merging on to the understanding of community responsibility, right? What does it mean to be a good relative, not only socially and culturally, but professionally, right? In the agencies that you serve. Are you being true to your mission of inclusiveness? Are you being true to your own understanding of being a good relatives? I think a number of times we need to reflect upon those understandings and questions. And, when we talk about being a good relative, or for some who like to use the term ally, it's always good that we have those individuals, but we need to take a step further in terms of what it means for them to be an ally. Does that mean just to have a friend who may identify as LGBTQ, right? Or does that mean that you help to support us and you protest and you write letters and you take actionable steps to support the Two-Spirit community, in a way that is not just quote unquote superficial, right? So we need the strong strong understandings and strong allyship with our relatives in that way. So I think that's important. But the highlight that I've seen is that within our own Two-Spirit communities, we're beginning to find true leadership, and defining what it means to be a leader within our own communities. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Elton. It's always incredible to hear the collaboration that has been happening, will continue to happen no matter what. These networks are the strongest within communities across Turtle Island. And a beautiful transition into Sheldon. Your work is obviously making a mark on communities throughout all of these different tribal communities. If you could speak to this question of what queer and Two-Spirit leadership, what position they have in transforming what public service and community accountability can look like.
Yeah. First off, I just want to say thank you for your kind words, Elton and Shandine. I really feel so blessed to have this opportunity to do this work. And I feel blessed to be one of the Two-Spirit leaders within this community. One thing that Elton touched on earlier and with what he just said was the idea of responsibility, the idea that we have a responsibility as Two-Spirit leaders to not only step up, but to show out and make the space that other people can't make for themselves within our society today. Unfortunately, us as Indigenous peoples all have to deal with the consequences of colonization and how that has shaped our communities and the way that they interact with each other and the way that it inevitably ends up coming back on our Two-Spirit relatives and how they're taught and brought up. And so as Two-Spirit people who are stepping into these roles, I think it's our job to kind of look back on where we've come from and look back at the things that have happened to us and the histories that we all share together, and really kind of sit with that and realize what that means for us as individuals, and how that history has shaped us, and then look forward to how we can come together as a community and shape our futures together. One of the most beautiful things that I have been able to learn or come into understanding within my Indigenous identity is the idea of connection. I feel like as Indigenous peoples, we're all about our reciprocal relationships, not with each other, not just with each other, but also with the land around us, the things that we interact with, and the words that we say. We all understand that there is, a weight to those words and those actions, but we also understand that those are that's because of the connections that they have with each other. And I think as we step into these roles, we need to respect those connections and kind of be able to create space that hasn't existed in a way that it has before. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing my words. I would say, us coming into these roles as Two-Spirit people allows us to kind of redefine what it means to be a Two-Spirit leader. We are very much advancing this work in a lot of ways that we haven't been able to before. I know that Elton here talked about how, there's a lot more connection now than there has been. And I've noticed that within my short amount of time working here. And I feel like for me personally, within my role as a Two-Spirit leader, my role is to connect people and to create bridges that maybe haven't been there, or, give people the opportunity to come together in a way that they haven't before. And I feel like that us as Two-Spirit leaders, we should really focus on that, or at least from my perspective, I feel like that is one of the most important aspects of that, is being able to create opportunities for connection and relationship and reciprocity within that. Because if you honor that at the root, your work is just going to come naturally. And I think it's very beautiful being able to understand that and being able to live that out through the work that I do. And I hope that I hold that responsibility to the highest regard throughout my entire life.
Thank you, Sheldon. It is such an honor to hear the amount of humbleness and respect that each of you are bringing to the roles that you hold within your own organizations and your own communities. I particularly loved your point of looking back to lessons that we have been learning for generations and using that as a foundation to envision a much stronger future ahead. Situating yourself in that position is very important. To that end, I wanted to dedicate a little bit more time for Bates specifically. I mean, looking back over the organization's unique history of serving an urban indigenous population for over 25 years, while not the oldest in the area, it is one of the longstanding organizations in one of the largest cities known for celebrating gender freedom in the US. That is a very unique position that Bates holds. I'm interested in hearing, Angel, what are some of the most valuable lessons over those 2 decades, almost 3 decades, that inform your work today? If you could just unmute your mic really quickly.
Oh, sorry.
No
I just
worries.
wanted to make sure the street noise did not interrupt the session. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Sheldon, and thank you, Elton, for such contributions to the conversation. We stand on a lot of folks' shoulders. There's just no way around. We still have one of the original founders of GAI in community, Randy Burns. And, and on a volunteer basis, Randy continues to creating space for community. And so, and, there's, books and anthologies and, a lot of work that has been part of their contribution over the years. And so I believe that we continue building upon what folks needed and wanted and prayed for. I know that we like to think that, folks got inspired by our Bates powwow to then go into their own community and create such space and such beauty and such healing. We'd like to think, we can't take credit because, we can't be, but hopefully, folks value that experience so much that they wanted to take it back home and recreate it there and make it their own. And so we are delighted to see all the Two-Spirit powwows across the US and Canada, and the different nuances and, and sometimes, not all the time, sometimes we get approached in, just technical questions about, about certain procedures that we have in place. And we're more than happy to share that information. Actually, we're actually working on a manual that we hope to make public around, Two-Spirit powwows and just learn lessons over the years. We're not experts, but we have a little of experience under our wings. I think something that is very unique about the Bay Area is also that we have been that folks may have connected with us and then branched off and created their own. There's now Two-Spirit drums in the Bay Area. We have the Bates drum and the Weekend We At drum, and they're both Two-Spirit. That's unheard of, in other parts of Indian country. We also have Southern relatives that are also forming and organizing and connecting, and claiming identity and queerness, and claiming space. There's also other organizations that have emerged as a result of hopefully, trying to find or meet the need within their particular community. So I think that as long as we continue that reciprocity that Sheldon mentioned, um, that willingness to learn and be there and provide some type of support or guidance. This past years, because of resources that we were able to secure, we have been able to provide some sponsorship, limited amount of sponsorship to different, events and organizations that are just starting up and need those types of resources. So I think that I'll end with this, is that we are also being very intentional about writing these lessons learned over the years. Because again, and this is just the administrator in me and the nerd in me. Um, if we don't write it, if we don't chronicle our own story, then folks can come in and erase it, and dismiss it. And so that has been so important in this particular role, that we have to, even if it sits, in an archive somewhere, but at least it's there, and that folks may be able to reference, if they need to.
Again, incredible to hear all of the exciting projects that are happening in your organization, Angel. I absolutely agree with taking agency of chronicling your own narrative is such an important aspect of doing this work and making sure that future generations have lessons that they can learn from without having to do it all over again themselves. They can stand on the work that you do on your shoulders in future generations. Following that same thread, I would like to hear a little bit more because as one of the younger panelists here, Sheldon, in your capacity as a community outreach coordinator, I'm interested in hearing how your work with the Montana Two-Spirit Society has shaped the way you engage as a future elder with younger generations of Indigenous queer youth. If you could give us a little bit of insight.
I want to say that I guess I want to start by saying that I have been very blessed with some beautiful connections with amazing youth here within our organization. I just feel so lucky to have the relations with the people that I do and the youth who come here looking to share their voices and create space for themselves in a way that, isn't very valued within colonial society. Let's see. I would say I'm still learning a lot. I'm just out of my youth era. So I'm kind of like in between where, I still have a lot to learn, but I also have a lot that I can give. And so within that, I think my work here has really taught me to kind of step back and allow space for these youth to have their own say and plan their own things, and really give them the tools and opportunity to express who they are and explore things that they want to do without necessarily us having our hand on the wheel as an organization. I would say within my understanding of youth, my background was in group care work at a group home before I transitioned here, and that gave me a lot of perspective into, the voices of our youth who have been harmed through various means, and carry that trauma into how they carry themselves in the world. And so I think by creating those spaces where they can speak their minds, where they can follow their own heart, and where they can create the connections that they want to create, I think it's really important. And then it also allows those youth to create the connections that they will make to continue their work well beyond any of the time that they would have shared with me. I think as Indigenous people, we are very much storytellers and story keepers. And so, for me, I'm collecting all the information that I can and all the stories that I can so I can one day pass them on to all the youth that I work with. And then in turn, give them the opportunity to create their own stories, which they will then share down the road. And just knowing that that's going to continue on and on well beyond any imagining that I can have. It really fills me with a lot of joy and a lot of perspective on how we can value the undervalued voices within our society. I think, unfortunately, due to colonization, the voices of our youth and our young people are very much thrown to the side as unimportant. They're just kids. They're young. They don't really know what's going on. But I don't think that could be further from the truth. Like, these are people who are being formed and having their foundations within all of the society and all of its issues that are going on now. And I think they, more than anyone, have the right to be able to express that. And we, as older generations, have the responsibility to create that space for them in a way that has been robbed from them and from us, within our past. I think in a way, when we create those spaces for our youth, we also heal the generations that came before that never got to have that opportunity to speak. And I think there's something really beautiful in that. And that's part of the responsibility that I want to carry in the work that I do with youth, is being responsible for maintaining those spaces where they can feel safe and comfortable to share their voices and who they are.
Thank you, Sheldon. Reminding us of that, it's a never-ending cycle as long as we set up the foundation for those future generations to learn from us as we did from our elders, reminding everyone that is a cycle that will not stop. We just have to fortify it as much as we can with the time that we are given. Following, again, this thread of lessons learned, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more from you, Elton, specifically with such a national and future international organization. How have the interactions with tribes from First Nations, if you have any connections with Maori or Aboriginal tribes, how have these interactions with other Indigenous peoples informed the way that you make connections within the tribes that are here on Turtle Island?
Thank you, Shandine. Fortunately enough, before I became the executive director of the Two-Spirit Center, I had the privilege of working internationally with the International Indigenous Working Group on HIV/AIDS, which had allowed me to work with our First Nations relatives, as well as our Maori and Aboriginal relatives, and then also our Indigenous relatives from South America. So I have a good connection with the leaders from the different areas, particularly working with that international group. But I think some of the intricacies, particularly here in the US, of working with tribal leadership is a little different than within other countries as well. I mean, one of the things that I often say when I do international work is, as American Indians, Alaska Natives, I feel a little privileged in the way that we are recognized by the US government as compared to other Indigenous communities in other countries. The basis of sovereignty is an integral part on the way we work with our federal government as Indigenous nations. But one of the things that we're advocating for right now, particularly because of the political and social climate, and the orders that have been targeted towards our community, we feel that there is a need that tribal nations need to begin to develop policy and laws that protect our community, whether it's violence prevention, hate crime laws, because right now, with just a general review of the tribal laws for the 574 federally recognized tribes, we have less than a handful of tribes that actually do have laws that are enacted by our tribal governments that are specific to Two-Spirit LGBTQ communities. To me, that's very disconcerting, because when actions by the federal government that has recently happened, we as tribes can utilize the sovereignty that is innate to us to protect our community, to protect our relatives in a better way. So, the center is really looking at working with the National Congress of American Indians, which does have a basis of tribal leaderships that we could reach, but also to reestablish NCAI's Two-Spirit Task Force, which was recognized by the organization and has been a little dormant for a number of years. So we feel it's the right time that we revitalize that task force so we can implement some of these strategies that will help to protect our communities more effectively at a tribal level. So seeing that quote unquote privilege of the US, I think is unique, but utilizing that aspect, I think is going to be beneficial once we begin to do some of this advocacy work that I proposed. So hopefully I answered your question, but that's kind of, the avenue that we're looking at, to provide some of these services for the community.
Thank you, Elton. And yes, it did absolutely answer where our strengths are. We can acknowledge the privilege that we have and still be able to use that to our own abilities and to the partnerships that we have, whether they be within the federally recognized government or our partners in First Nations and all of the Indigenous peoples of the world. As we transition into the end of our panel here today, we are going around in a circle of gratefulness. I'm going to say it a million times more before the end of this virtual broadcast, but I am so thankful for all of you dedicating this hour and a half of your time today, again, in your busiest month of the year, I'm sure. As we enter closing remarks, we at Native Americans in Philanthropy would love to give you guys the final word. This audience that we are broadcasting to today includes funders, fellow Native nonprofits that are doing similar work, elected tribal officials, elected government officials, emerging leaders, whether that be Native youth or allies in younger generations. What's one thing that you would want our audience of listeners to better understand as they walk away from this conversation? I will offer it to Sheldon to start us off.
Awesome. I just wanted to say thank you as well. I really appreciate the time that your organization has taken to host all of us. And also thank you to everyone else who is on here. It's so lovely to see your faces again. I would say one thing that I want to share with everyone here watching is just the idea of creating a connection. I would say if you can take a moment to create a connection with someone new, to share a story, to listen to what they have to say, or even come up with a new idea together. Even something very small can have a very big impact. And even doing something, as little as like volunteering for a day can mean so much more than you possibly know. Speaking towards what Elton and Angel had said earlier, a lot of our work had started with volunteer work and small coalitions of people that came together with a desire to create space for us. And look where we're at today. We get to share this space together on a platform that is far larger than anything that we could have made on our own. And I want to echo that sentiment as we move forward and just say, create a new connection, because you never know what connection you're going to make today is going to affect the work that you do later and is going to be able to help out somebody down the road in a way that you can't even imagine right now.
Ahead, Sheldon. I will offer a closing remark statement from you, Elton. If you would like to emphasize any one particular idea or topic that we've covered here today that you'd like our audience to better have an understanding of.
Yeah, sure. So again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel, but also to be, you know, provide this space, particularly during these times and to celebrate Pride Month. I think it's a great time to be able to do that. But one of the things that I often like to highlight when speaking to community is to be intentional with your inclusion, right? A lot of the times, we're asked to sit in spaces that don't include the Two-Spirit community, right? And for me, as someone who, has grown up with cultural values and tribal understandings, when you don't include individuals, the circle is not complete, right? And how can we be truly a community, truly true relatives in a way when we're not being able to include, a specific population in the work that we're doing. And that goes even beyond just our native community, our Two-Spirit community. It also goes on to, our foundations, our resources, our relatives that have access to resources, right? When we're talking about native communities, we also have this not necessarily subpopulation, but this unique population of relatives, right, that identify as Two-Spirit, as LGBTQ individuals. And for most of us, we hold sacred space within our own communities that, when we are left out, it feels really truly detrimental. So be intentional about your inclusion, whether it's the work you're implementing, whether it's the resources that you're providing, or whether it's just a panel like this where you need, another voice to complete the circle. So, let's all continue to be good relatives and support each other in a good way, and thank you again for providing this space for us.
Zongo, Elton. I will pass it our final closing remark to you, Angel. If you could emphasize or highlight any one particular topic that you would like our audience to have a better understanding of as we walk away from this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, first and foremost, and for the inclusion. What I would say is I would just like to express deep gratitude for community and those that have connected with us virtually, those that connect with us via Instagram or Facebook, or who have actually attended some of our gatherings and some of our events. We need you as much as hopefully you need us. And so expressing deep gratitude, and also to all the funders. We've been really blessed also to have really wonderful and deep connections with some funders who believe in the work and believe in the importance of creating safer and braver spaces for community by community. And lastly, in going back to the shoulders that we set upon, is that we have a lot of elders or young elders within the Bates community who who are now connected to the organization for the past 20 years. So I want to send a thank you to Land O'Lakes or Miko Thomas, to Roger Kuhn, Dr. Roger Kuhn, to Jim Eagle, to Javier, to all the ones that have just paved the way for all this beauty to be present in community and to have it accessible. That the concept of generosity is so important, especially as we are facing this current administration. I was at the HIPNAP conference, and I think the takeaway there was generations versus administrations. This is too important because we're working in the generational lens of hopefully 52 years, rather than one mere organization, one mere administration. So thank you.
Thank you to each of you so much. This conversation has been incredible to myself, and I hope to all of those in our audience here today. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to open your hearts and to share your stories with us today. I can't thank you enough. To each of you. I would like to take a moment to emphasize that for our organization, this conversation is not simply a moment of recognition, nor just simply a moment of celebration. It is a commitment to continual action, to stand in solidarity. We stand with all of our historically marginalized communities, and that includes our Native LGBTQIA relatives. We recognize that in order to be truly effective allies, we have to support with that intentionality, with that reciprocity, and focus on acknowledging the unique struggles and strengths of Native queer individuals within the broader fight for equality. Again, ahiahet to everyone for coming. I will pass it off to Aaron to close us out.
Thanks, Shondine. As we close, I want to thank our panelists for the truth shared today, truths rooted in cultural strength, deep care, and enduring resistance. You reminded us that Indigiqueer and Two-Spirit liberation is not just about identity, but about the connections to our histories, our cultures, and our futures. Today's conversation is part of a much longer story. Before there was marriage equality or corporate pride floats, there were people, queer, trans, and Two-Spirit people, putting their lives on the line in the name of equality. From Stonewall to the Black Cat Tavern, from Compton's cafeteria to local acts of defiance we'll never read about in history books, our movements have always been led by those pushed to the margins. Marsha P. Johnson, who was there at Stonewall, once said, "No pride for some of us without liberation for all of us." Those words still ring true. Visibility is not safety. Representation is not liberation. Rights on paper don't always protect our lives. And yet we keep showing up, we keep building, and we will keep loving each other fiercely. Let us remember the first Pride was a riot, and the fight for dignity, safety, and joy continues today. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. As a reminder, member education sessions like these are open to the public as a highlight of our member benefits. NAP membership is open to Indigenous relatives as well as non-Indigenous allies. If you are not a NAP member yet and you would like to learn more, we encourage you to visit our website, nativephilanthropy.org, or email our team at membership@nativephilanthropy.org. You still have time to join our network of dedicated nonprofit professionals and cross-sector partners and gain access to even more member-exclusive content. Our team is honored to welcome our active NAP members to join us in July for a member-exclusive discussion on housing in Indian country. Nonprofits across the so-called United States are recentering community-based knowledge to address the widespread need for affordable housing and strengthening Native home ownership capacity. We hope to see you there on July 17th as we delve into these national and local efforts to realize a future where everyone has a home. Lastly, you should be receiving an email with a link to a short survey. Please take a few moments to share your opinions and what you'd like to see in future sessions. It should take about 5 to 6 minutes to complete, but provides invaluable feedback for our team and planning. As our conference flurry settled down, the entire NAP team is rooted in gratitude for your continued support. Showing up in solidarity is more important than ever to protect our people when, with your partnership, we will continue to push the sector forward. Thank you again for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Pride Month. Hello.